Okay, let's unpack something truly unexpected today.
Hmm.
You've got Nostradamus, right? Centuries-old prophecies,
Hmm.
and then a 2019 scientific study. And both sort of hint at potential, well, major conflict between India and Pakistan around now, 2025.
It's definitely a strange starting point, isn't it? This convergence of ancient prophecy and modern science.
Exactly.
But it does immediately highlight just how, I guess, fragile things have felt in that relationship for a long time, especially as we hit this period.
Absolutely. And that's really where we're going today with this deep dive. We're zeroing in on this very recent, very significant escalation, Operation Sindoor.
Right.
You, our listener, shared a whole bunch of news reports, different analyses covering this Indian military action and, well, the reactions. It's been intense.
And putting this operation into context is, I think, crucial. It didn't just, appear out of nowhere.
Right.
Understanding what came before it, the events leading up, and the official reasons given, that's key to really grasping what's going on.
Totally agree. So our mission here is to sift through these sources you sent, piece together the sequence of events, understand the why, at least the stated why, and look at how the world reacted.
And importantly, trying to stick to the facts as
Right.
reported, right? Keeping our own assumptions out of it as much as possible.
Exactly. A clear, fact-based look. So let's start at the trigger point. What was the event that, according to the reports, set this all off?
Well, the sources consistently point back to one specific, really tragic incident.
The Pahalgam attack, April 22nd, 2025. It happened in Baisaran, near Pahalgam in Kashmir, and by all accounts, it sounds horrific.
Yeah, the details that came out were pretty grim. A significant loss of life.
26 people killed.
Huh.
25 were tourists, and one was a Nepali citizen.
Mm.
But what really seemed to inflame things, according to these reports, was the allegation that the tourists were targeted based on their religion, because they were Hindu.
Right, and that kind of specific religious targeting, well, that's a dangerous line to cross. It naturally ramps up tensions hugely.
You'd expect a strong reaction. And India's reaction was pretty immediate. Accusations flew towards Lashkar-e-Taiba, Leti, and also a group called the TRF, which is reportedly linked to them.
Okay.
And importantly, India directly pointed the finger at Pakistan, saying they had, quote, credible intelligence, plus survivor accounts and other evidence linking Pakistan to the attack.
So India's official line was clear. Pakistan-backed groups were responsible. What did India expect Pakistan to do then?
The expectation, as laid out in the sources, was pretty straightforward. Pakistan needed to take quick, visible action against these groups, dismantle their operations, their infrastructure on Pakistani soil.
Basically, deal with the threat India saw coming from their territory.
Yeah.
And Pakistan's response.
Well, according to the sources, Pakistan strongly denied any involvement. Flat-out denial.
Mm.
And they issued their own counter-accusations against India.
Mm.
So you have this denial from Pakistan, facing India's very public accusations. And that standoff, it seems, pushed India towards taking action itself.
Which brings us right to Operation Sindoor, India's military response. The timing seems significant. Too early morning, May 7th.
Yes, it was a night operation. Happened between Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, May 6th to 7th. And they didn't keep it quiet. The announcement came via a post on X, formerly Twitter, very public.
A clear signal. And what was the stated goal of Operation Sindoor?
The Indian sources say the main objective was to take apart what they call the terror supply chain and the operational bases of several specific groups. Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed Jim, and Hizbul Mujahideen, HM.
Okay, so targeting the infrastructure of these known militant groups, where exactly were these targets located? The reports gave some details, right?
They did. The operation apparently hit 9 locations described as high-value terrorist bases, and these were spread across both Pakistan proper and Pakistan-administered Kashmir, or
Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, as India calls it, always a sensitive area, claimed by both sides.
highly sensitive, yes. Hitting targets there carries extra weight.
And the methods used. The reports mention things like loitering munitions. Maybe explain briefly what those are for anyone listening.
Sure. Loitering munitions are basically smart drones, unmanned aerial vehicles. They can fly to an area, hang around, loiter maybe for quite a while, identify a target, and then strike precisely when commanded.
So they offer precision, potentially from a distance, reducing risk to the attackers.
Exactly. India claims they use these and other precise weapons launched from inside Indian territory.
And the claim was they destroyed 9 command centers across these different locations. The operation itself sounds like it was pretty quick.
Very quick, according to the reports. Lasts about 25 minutes in total. roughly 1:05 a.m. to 1:30 a.m. That suggests, very coordinated strikes happening almost simultaneously.
25 minutes. And across those 9 main bases, how many individual spots were hit?
The Indian reports mentioned 21 distinct targets across those 9 bases. They even listed specific locations, giving a sense of the scale.
Like where?
Okay, so there was a chow camp near Sialkot, identified as a Hizbul base, then Kotli Abbas and Gulpur in Polk Sawanala camp. Bilal camp, though the location for that one isn't always specified precisely. Then Kotli camp, reportedly 15 kilometers inside Polk, Barna camp, 10 kilometers in, another Sarjal camp, 8 kilometers inside Polk, Mamuna camp, 15 kilometers inside Polk.
So several targets inside Polk.
Yes, and then 2 quite deep inside Pakistan itself, Mudke, which is about 30 kilometers in,
Okay.
and Bahawalpur. That one is significant, 100 kilometers inside Pakistan.
Wow, 100 kilometers. That's a long way. That definitely sends a strong message going that deep.
No question. What about the casualties claimed?
Well, this is where the numbers get starkly different depending on the source. Indian reports claimed very high numbers, over 90 initially. Some reports saying maybe 100 or more terrorists killed. One specific report even mentioned family members of Masood Azhar, the GEM chief, being killed, about 10 people at his home, allegedly. But again, these are the Indian claims.
Right, important to note that. And India's justification for all this, what was their official line?
India framed it very clearly as a targeted, non-aggressive strike focused only on terrorist camps. They stressed that no Pakistani civilians, no economic targets, no military installations were hit.
So purely counterterrorism in their case.
Exactly. An act of self-defense, they said, directly responding to that Pahalgam attack.
And the political leadership in India. Sounds like they were closely involved.
Yes, reports suggest Prime Minister Modi was directly involved, even suggesting the name Operation Sindoor. Apparently, he briefed his cabinet beforehand and got their full backing.
Okay, so that's the Indian side of the story, their actions and justifications. Let's shift to Pakistan's reaction now. The report suggests some initial confusion or maybe downplaying.
That seems fair to say. Initially, there were attempts to minimize what had happened, but that story seemed to evolve.
How?
Well, the Pakistani military eventually did acknowledge attacks had occurred. They confirmed strikes at 6 locations, but interestingly, they reported 24 impacts in total across those 6 sites.
6 locations, 24 impacts.
Okay.
But there was conflicting information coming out from different officials.
Yeah, quite noticeably. The DGISPR, that's the head of the military's media wing, initially mentioned 3 locations being hit, then it became 4, then finally settled on 6. And Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, in his public statements, acknowledged 5 locations. So you have these shifting numbers, 3, 4, 5, 6, which does raise questions about, what exactly happened and how it was being communicated internally and externally.
Makes sense. And what about casualties from the Pakistani side? We heard India's claim of 90 to 100 plus.
Pakistan reported far lower numbers. They stated 8 deaths and 33 injuries resulted from the attacks.
8 deaths versus over 90, that's a massive difference. A key point of conflicting information right there.
Absolutely. It highlights the difficulty in getting a completely clear picture in these situations.
So what was the overall tone of Pakistan's official response? Denial, condemnation.
Strong condemnation. Prime Minister Sharif called it an imposed war by India and stated very clearly that Pakistan reserved the right to respond forcefully.
Okay, strong words.
Pakistan's defense minister also weighed in, claiming the attacks came from Indian airspace, which India denied, saying launches were from their territory, and he vowed a befitting response. So the rhetoric definitely pointed towards potential further escalation.
And did Pakistan take any immediate concrete actions?
Yes, several. They declared a state of emergency in hospitals in Bahawalpur, that city 100 kilometers inside Pakistan that India said it targeted.
Right.
They also reportedly authorized their armed forces to take appropriate action, whatever that might entail. And very significantly, Pakistan closed its entire airspace for 48 hours.
48 hours, wow.
Yeah, and specifically shut down the airports in Lahore and Sialkot for that same period. That signals a very high state of alert.
Definitely. Any other prominent voices from Pakistan?
Bilawal Bhutto, a major political figure, also condemned the attack. He asserted that Pakistan's military had already responded in some way and would respond further, reinforcing that message of sovereignty being violated and the intent to retaliate.
Okay, so a tense situation, conflicting reports, strong rhetoric. Naturally, the rest of the world was watching closely. What were the international reactions like?
Concern was a major theme. China, obviously a key regional player and Pakistan's ally, urged both sides to stay calm, exercise restraint.
Standard diplomatic response, maybe?
Pretty standard, yes, but important nonetheless. Russia also expressed deep concern about the rising military tension, specifically mentioning the Pahalgam attack as a starting point for this recent escalation. Japan echoed similar concerns.
What about the U.S. and the U.K.?
Well, India seemed quite proactive in its diplomacy immediately after the strikes. India's National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval, briefed his U.S. counterpart, the U.S. NSA, and also the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, very soon after the operation.
Okay, getting their narrative out quickly.
Seems like it. The Indian embassy in the U.S. also put out a statement explaining India's rationale. And interestingly, Rishi Sunak, who was the UK Prime Minister until recently, made a public statement.
What did he say?
He essentially said that terrorist attacks shouldn't be accepted and that India's action against terrorist infrastructure was, in that context, justified.
That's quite a strong statement of support, relatively speaking.
It is. And Doval didn't just start with the U.S. He reportedly briefed counterparts in the U.K., Saudi Arabia, Japan, and also officials in Russia and France.
Covering all major players.
Seems so. And the message conveyed, especially to China, was reportedly that India doesn't want war, but it will respond firmly if there are any more, quote, misadventures.
A clear warning. Okay, let's look inside India now. How did the domestic political scene react?
The reports suggest remarkable unity, actually. Political parties from across the spectrum voiced support for the military action.
Really? Even opposition parties?
Yes. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh praised the armed forces, making everyone proud, and invoked a Hindu deity. Arvind Kejriwal, former Delhi chief minister, expressed pride in the army and national unity against terror. Rahul Gandhi from the main opposition Congress party posted simply, "Proud of the army, Jai Hind," which means victory to India.
So, broad consensus there.
It appears so. The Tripura chief minister congratulated the army and said the prime minister had fulfilled his promise. It reflects a strong sense of national security being paramount, it seems.
And did the Indian government take any internal security measures?
Yes. Home Minister Amit Shah held high-level meetings with chief ministers and police chiefs of the border states. He also reportedly directed that leaves for paramilitary forces be canceled.
Upping the alert level domestically, too.
Definitely. And another visible sign of the tension of the daily flag-lowering ceremony at the Attari-Wagah border, the parade. That was temporarily suspended.
Right, that's usually a big symbol of the guarded relationship, but also a daily routine. Suspending it shows how serious things got.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered the attack, the operation, the reactions. But the sources also brought up something else, didn't they? These predictions of future conflict. Back to where we started, almost.
Yes, it's a rather sobering part of the narrative. We mentioned Nostradamus earlier. Some interpretations suggest his writings point to a conflict involving India, the elephant, facing attack maybe linked to Pakistan's nuclear threat.
Prophecies are, open to interpretation.
Of course, highly interpretive, but it adds to this undercurrent of anxiety. More concretely, though, there's that 2019 scientific study.
Right, the one from the University of Colorado and Rutgers, published in Science Advances. That wasn't prophecy, that was modeling.
Exactly, peer-reviewed science. And it specifically modeled a potential nuclear war between India and Pakistan breaking out around 2025.
And the predicted consequences in that study were just devastating.
Truly alarming. The study projected potentially over 100 million immediate deaths just from the blasts, the firestorms.
Horrifying.
But it went beyond that. It warned of a global environmental catastrophe. Millions of tons, 16 to 36 million tons of black carbon, soot, being thrown into the upper atmosphere.
Blocking sunlight, right?
Blocking sunlight, causing a sharp drop in global temperatures, messing up rainfall patterns, leading to massive crop failures worldwide, widespread famine.
So a regional nuclear conflict having catastrophic global consequences. It's a stark reminder of what's ultimately at stake here.
It absolutely is. It underlines why de-escalation is so critical, always.
The sources did also briefly mention India's approach over the years, this idea of strategic restraint.
Yeah, that concept came up. The idea that India, despite provocations over the years, have often chosen patience, strategic silence, weighing the global situation and its own international image before acting forcefully.
Which makes Operation Sindoor seem like a potential shift, or at least a very significant departure from that pattern, perhaps.
It could be interpreted that way, yes. A much more direct, overt action than we've often seen.
Okay, so let's try and summarize the key takeaways for you, the listener. Operation Sindoor was India's direct military answer to the Pahalgam terrorist attack.
Right. It involves strikes on multiple alleged terrorist sites inside Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir.
This triggered immediate reactions, denials, counterclaims, international calls for calm, domestic support in India, and heightened military alerts on both sides.
And it brought these underlying tensions and even these older, unsettling predictions about conflict right back to the forefront.
So you should now have a pretty consolidated picture of these recent events, the reasons given by India, the immediate fallout, hopefully a clearer view than just catching scattered headlines.
Bringing together the different pieces of information that you shared with us.
Now, thinking about that long history, the decades of conflict and tension between India and Pakistan, and those warnings, whether from Nostradamus or from that scientific study, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How does this specific action, Operation Sindoor, change things going forward? Does it set a new precedent? How might it impact the already fragile stability of a nuclear-armed region?
And what are the longer-term consequences of one country launching military strikes, however targeted they claim them to be, across the borders of another, even contested borders?
Yeah, a lot of complex questions. Definitely something for you, our listener, to think about.